All right, welcome everybody. This meeting is being recorded, so for those who may join in a little bit, they'll be able to watch the recording later. Thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to this ITACA Connect, a space where stories, ideas, and community come together. My name is Laura Canevari. I'm the Director and CEO of ITACA Solutions, and it is a pleasure for me to start this new ITACA Connect event, which is not just another webinar or part of a webinar series. This really is an opportunity for the network of ITACA associates and like-minded people working in climate adaptation to meet, share goals, and grow together. So as you already know, ITACA is a technical assistance service provider based in Panama and working across all of the Caribbean region. And we specialize in supporting projects that look to build climate resilience and ocean innovation, not just in the broader Caribbean, but also in Central America and Colombia. And today is a very special day because we get to have science communication strategist, Karla Gutierrez, to join us and to give us an interview. And basically, the idea is that today we'll begin with a short 15-minute interview. It's that going to be then followed by a number of questions. I have a couple of questions to start off with, but please also you can turn on your cameras, take off the mute on your microphones and ask your questions directly or put them in the chat. And hopefully at the end of the session, we'll have about 10 minutes or so to do open networking towards the end as well. So there's no pressure to be polished in this space. So please just ask whatever questions come to mind. We are very lucky to have Karla here, who not only has, over 10 years of professional experience turning complex climate science into clear and engaging content, but she's also got, a lot of expertise in graphic design, in strategic communication. She has helped multiple organizations share their climate work with different kinds of audiences. And of course, she's been with ITACA nearly a year now, helping us communicate the impact of our work in the field. So thank you so much, Karla. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Those who join us, and you may not know, the conversation today is going to reflect on a piece of writing that Karla did in our website, which you can find in our blog section. And I've just posted the link on our chat. So in case you haven't yet seen the blog, we strongly encourage you to have a look at it. But also, if you haven't seen it, it's not pre-needed reading for this conversation. Just tag along and join me on welcoming Karla and starting our discussion today. How are you today, Karla?
Very good. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's a real privilege to be able to talk about this topic and being here and sharing with you this moment.
Thank you. Now, you wrote in our blog a story that is titled "The Translator in the Room." Now, what does that metaphor means to you, and how has your understanding of strategic science communication evolved through your work at ITACA and other organizations?
Well, I think the use of that term, like the translator, is basically how I see the role of a communication strategist or a science communicator, because it's someone that actually helps to take those terminologies, those technical terms, those words that sometimes are waiting to go to a dictionary to really get to understand in a whole context so that everybody can understand it. And specifically, like in this different topics like climate and environmental work and all the technical experts that we can work with, there's a lot of language that is very important, and it's really connected to science, right? But the thing is that sometimes they're describing something that's very important, but it doesn't connect with a community because they don't know how to really find the same words that they can understand. So basically, that's how I see it. That's why it's a translator. And Well, since I was very young, I was able to become an interpreter and a translator for missions that came to the country. It was actually after Hurricane Mitch. And so this is very interesting because it was a connection with some climate thing that had happened in my country. I'm originally from Honduras. And after that, there was a lot of mission teams that came to the country to help. And so they needed translators. And at the moment, I was 12 years old. And so it was interesting that, well, my parents were very open to letting me do it and help. But that was one of the ways in which I saw the impact of the translator, not just because um, you're there knowing or being bilingual, but because there was something that was happening that was really important. And somebody had to make that connection between the two people who were talking. And so, yeah, it was pretty interesting that way, how that evolved into what I have worked now since, I mean, it's been a while, but I know that those things have added to my experience in the field. And since I joined ITACA, one of the interesting things that I saw is that whenever you go into the field, and whenever you get to know experiences like the people that you're working with through the projects, then you understand, okay, so this is what they understand, like their language they're speaking. And it doesn't mean that they're speaking like a different language. We speak Spanish, but or we speak English, but we still have things that we would like to translate to them. So yes, I've had a couple of experiences that have added to this. And I would say, yes, that is the way I see it and how I translated it into this specific piece.
Well, that's commendable, Carla, and really congratulations for having such an impact in your country from such an early age. And I feel like it has gone from just translating from a language to another language, like Spanish, English, to translating content, right? To translating information so that it retains its meaning, but that it can be understood by different people. And I mean, you mentioned a lot as well the importance of having the opportunity to be in the field and to kind of connect with some of these different audiences. And I wonder whether there's any particular experience or memory that you can share with us, a particular moment where you saw, the value of storytelling and where you felt that being able to be in the field and connect with potential audiences really helped you, in your communication journey.
Yes, actually, well, as I was mentioning, going into the field, specifically with Ithaca, I had the opportunity to go back to a project that had been finished for about a year after we made the visit. And what was interesting about this is that I already had the opportunity to read the final report or the case study, and I had heard everything from like the team because I had recently been involved into Ithaca, like joined the team. But at the moment when we went to the field, this was like specifically the Gulf of Montijo. I had been able to read about, the mangroves, what it's important about it, and how the project helped the people locally. But there, I was able to meet the people. I was able to know those partners that we had on the field. And besides just knowing them, now I can tell you like their names and I know how they work, what is their passion. And that helps so much because your storytelling changes. You stop just talking about a project for data or saying things that are part of the reports, which is important because that's how that financial institutions work. But you actually know the story behind and you know that person. So it's important because like we got to know the fishing organization and all the ladies that are involved in there. And then they told us the story that, well, not the story, they were just mentioning, like at what time did they have to get up to be able to be in that meeting because their community is not really close to the city or the place where we were meeting. And so when you understand that, then you're like, hey, we have to think about this, before we decide at what time we're going to put a meeting or whenever we're thinking about what kind of materials we're putting out, in this case, in communication. Because what? These are people that actually, this is their livelihood, right? And so is putting their, like, it's very, very empathetic and putting their livelihoods and their life as important as it is, and then thinking about that when you're creating strategic communications, which would be, materials for them. Why would I go ahead and put everything on a website if they are not able to have internet? So those kinds of things come into mind whenever you're part of this process and whenever you understand the reality that communities have. And so I believe that is one of the things that as communicators, we have to be reminded, that you're speaking for them too. It's a two-way street, because as we learn from them, we also are able to tell others, these people have this need, or they have this quality, which would be great if we can just incorporate it into different planning. So I think that's one of the things that comes into enhancing the storytelling experience.
Excellent. And I think it's interesting that you chose the Gulf of Montijo in particular. For those of you who don't know, this was a project that we did in 2024, where basically we supported the development of the community-based mangrove restoration plan, the community monitoring plan for mangroves, as well as a plan for economic development, along with a lot of technical studies that were done by another consulting firm. And it's interesting because, that project was all about mangroves. And this week here in Panama, we have the third Congress of Mangroves of the Americas. Today is the third day, and I've actually been there for the last 2 days. And what I've experienced are like different conversations in different rooms. So you have the rooms with the technical experts where they're presenting their charts and their storytelling around data, basically, where data grounds the story. And then you have the other rooms where the community is talking about their experience, in the field. And I just wonder, like what advice could you have for, be it the scientists or the communities, to kind of bridge between these rooms? How do we bridge between the science and the community through communication?
Well, I think that's very interesting because from like all the experience I've had in different organizations, sometimes communicators are not seen as someone who can be at the table and just have a conversation also with. And so in this case, I would say in order to be able to connect those rooms or connect those bridges is being able to understand what each of them is trying to say. And so as part of the blog, I also mentioned how important it is when we are part of the whole process, right? Because when we are there, we get to see how that person developed that idea, how that data was placed into that slide, and why is it that you're trying to present exactly that data and not everything else. And so when you do understand like where the science is coming from, then you're able to get what is more relevant and get that knowledge translated to the other room where maybe they can use it for something else and the impact is greater. So this is very interesting because as communicators, we are taught that we have to understand our audience before we get the messages out. But in this case, it is not just getting the messages out, but really putting the messages together. So it's like what they're saying, like in both rooms, would be important, but then what exactly is that they can do to make this collaboration stronger, right? And so it's very interesting because it's not like simplifying science or not just putting it into like a dummy way, but it is, as the term was written in the blog, like a knowledge broker. When you get to tie one thing with the other and then being able to communicate that. But obviously that helps when you're part of the process, when you understand like what has been happening from the beginning, and then you go ahead and connect the dots. Because it's very hard to see it like the whole perspective when you're the one that actually is working through the data and when you're the technical person. But then when it's someone from like say the outside, it's easier to have a bigger perspective.
I think that's very important because, I mean, from the Ithaca perspective, like what we decided was a strategic decision, to create a collaboration with a communications and science strategist, because we felt that we were not being able to communicate the impact of our work. So when we first engaged with you, it really started with, here's the product, can you help us communicate? But along the journey in this year, we've kind of realized that the earlier we embed you in the process, that has a lot of different kind of, benefits to the project. And I wonder, what kind of opportunities do you think that organizations might be missing when they don't involve the science communicator from the onset of a project?
Yeah, I think, well, as you mentioned, that has also been something new for me, being able to contribute at the table from the beginning. So I think one of the things that you get to see from that is that communicators might be able to just bring more to the table than another one. Why? Because we have different perspectives, we have different let's say, experiences. And in the meantime, we're still thinking like strategically, how can this a specific piece of communication at the moment be able to communicate what you want? So by going through or being invited from the beginning of the process, what would happen is that you would identify those little snippets or little pieces of communication that can be used along the process. And this is something very interesting because like from one of the experiences I had before, I was able to make an infographic, an animated infographic. And so when they sat me down, they just said, okay, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And so for me, it was like, okay, but who is going to be seeing this? Like, who exactly is the main public for this? I mean, because you can go ahead and just make it. But after asking the right questions, then I was able to get to the final decision and being able to understand that this video was actually for decision makers, for people who were going to take this information and they had to like digest it in a way that it was able for them to take a decision in a political level. It's very different because there's different audiences, as I mentioned, and there's different people who you're going to be in contact with. But whenever you're able to be part of that process, then you're able to bridge those things. And that's one of the things that I do mention, being able to include communicators in this part of the process is actually a benefit for both sides. Because as, I don't know, a tip that I could give to other communicators maybe, it's always being curious. It's always being and trying to know who you're working with, what you're actually working for. And at some point, it definitely transmits the passion that the organization where you're working at has, right? Because like, I'm not a marine biologist, I'm not an environmentalist. Like from the beginning, I didn't start my studies there, but I know that my curiosity has gotten me to understand those topics better. And you don't become like an expert on them, but you do understand. And so you start to understand what's important for one, and then believe or just put in the priorities of what's going out as communication products, what could be more strategic for this? Or we're going to highlight that another thing for, the person who is working on that specific area. And so I think that's what my advice would be, for organizations in case they're thinking about it. I know it has evolved a lot, but I mean, that's something that we can still continue to grow.
I think if we compare what climate communication or climate science communication was 10 years ago to what it is now, we can quickly detect the pitfalls of early engagements and early communications products. We always saw the diagrams and the data as the way in which the scientists were trying to communicate what was happening. And it took us so long to really relate to that. Actually, we never really relate to the charts. We relate to the personal stories and the histories of people in the field, impacted by these realities. And I mean, one thing that I have found as well is that, and with you especially being part of the team, is not only, yes, let's communicate the final product, but we are doing projects where we are going into communities that have been affected by 30 years of development interventions, many times failed development interventions, where there is a certain level of sensitivity, and especially of how you, from the onset, communicate the project, communicate and manage expectations of the community. Where I think that this kind of role from the onset as part of the project becomes essential. It's been the experience of ITACA in the last few months, especially like we've been doing consultation processes. There's a lot of institutional fatigue. So being able to come with a fresh message, with a kind of a different approach, and being able to relate to the audience, which I think is one of the key things that you've said, right? Is understand who is this for? What is the purpose of this communication? Which perhaps we were failing at in the past. We were just giving information, which is not the same as communicating, right? And I just wonder, like, yeah, for you, like you have seen the evolution of communication science, and for climate change in particular, what would be the next step? Like, what would you like to see emerge or become more mainstream as we improve in our practice?
Well, I think it's very interesting because it is something that happened in marketing, I believe, a couple of years before, when brands started to understand that they had to humanize, and they use that term, right? Their brands, because in order for them to be able to raise their sales, they had to connect with the person in a very personal level. And what would happen here is basically, or how I would see it, for strategic communications in science and in all this technical topics, I would say how we see the connection between the knowledge that we have and how this impacts the people that we're working with, the decisions that are being taken, and like I said, it can be a very high level or it can be a very local thing, but all these leads to action. And so I think it's very important that we have that conscience of the work that we're doing, because whenever you put something out, like you said, you publish something or you write something, what is the impact this is gonna have, more than just analytics, more than just the numbers that we have all these people reading, or we got this many visualizations on social media, is that the information that's out there is actually going to be there for the people who need it, right? And I think that would be the thing that I see for the future, that hopefully science starts to connect in that way, and that knowledge can be actually translated into that impact.
I mean, and we are at a time where there's so much miscommunication, so much fake news. So, you're talking about high values and really thinking about the impact of our communications a lot more than most people are at the moment. So that's very insightful, Karla. Thank you.